I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation. Just reiterating a couple of things that some of you have already heard Christy say. Your phone lines are muted. If you need to unmute, #6, and then muting is *6. You will be able at the end of the program to unmute your phones to ask questions, or you can use the chat box. We are going to record today's session, and the recording and the slides will be available to you. And we welcome your feedback on the form that will come up at the end of the program. So what I'd like to do is share a couple of things that we've heard from our members. We've had people ask us, what do we know about different aspects of nutrition? Does the diet play a part in slowing down the progression of kidney disease? And how much does diet really matter when people are on dialysis, since the dialysis diet is considered awful and boring? Well, we've listened to our members, and today's program is going to address some of those questions. I am happy to share that our speaker today, Jessianna Saville, has the answer to more than just those questions, and she has some great tips for you as well. Jessianna is a registered dietitian licensed in the state of Texas and has a website called Kidney Grub, where she has resources and recipes for patients and staff. She's also a new member of our advisory council, and she contributes recipes on our website as well as articles for our newsletter. She works with people with kidney disease, both in dialysis, and she also has a private practice as a nutritionist. She feels passionately that nutritious, kidney-friendly food can help people feel their best. She believes that no matter the dietary restriction, kidney-friendly food should look great and taste great. So Jessianna, please share with us a livable, lovable approach to kidney disease nutrition.
Okay, thank you so much. I am really, okay, now I'm unmuted. Thank you so much for letting me be here today. I'm super excited. I live in Texas generally, but I'm up in the St. Louis area today, kind of on the go. But this is my most favorite topic to talk about, and in fact, this is the logo of my whole business, is making the renal diet livable and lovable, because I just think food is such an incredible part of our lives. I mean, from birth to death, all of the biggest events in our life are really highlighted by food, and food is just an emotional, a social, it's not just nourishment, and so making it work in our lives so we don't dread it, I feel is absolutely important. So I'm excited to share this topic today, and I'm very passionate about what nutrition can do to help slow progression of kidney disease and improve people's quality of life. I not only see that when I work with people, but the research proves that over and over and over again. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why there's a lot of confusion about the renal diet, because there is. I wish I got paid a quarter every time someone came to my office and pretty much said they don't know what to eat because everything's conflicting out there. People say, I can't have this because of diabetes, I can't have this because of kidney disease, and then I can't have this because of heart disease. Like, I don't know what to eat. But there's a good systematic way to go about this to make it really, really tasteful and lovable. We're going to talk about how you can slow progression and prevent complications, because both of those can be done with nutrition. And then a few tips and tricks of the trade to make your diet livable and lovable. So this, I love this. It says, Dear Diet, things aren't going to work between us. It's not me, it's you. You're tasteless, boring, and I can't stop cheating on you. And like I said before, that is often how people feel about the renal diet. And it doesn't have to be that way. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of reasons for the confusion out there. A couple of reasons is because nutrition is such a hot topic everywhere, and we get information from celebrities, we get information from well-meaning family members, we get information from Dr. Ott. The internet is just like a black hole of information about the renal diet, and it's very confusing because all the lists conflict, and they say this is good for your kidneys and this is bad for your kidneys, and it's very, very confusing. Even the labels on food can cause confusion because people will feel like they're buying something healthy, and it can end up being damaging to the kidneys or not good. Marketers are great at how they make us want to buy food. So there's a lot of confusion about the diet. The other reason there's a lot of confusion is that every person is different, and depending on the stage of kidney failure, the different dietary principles you need to follow change. So someone that's on dialysis has a very, very different diet than someone that would be early stage 3 kidney failure. And that's the other reason that there's a lot of confusion about the renal diet. As a side note here, the renal diet really is a misnomer. It's really hard to pin down what exactly a renal diet is because, like I said, it's very dependent on the person and how much their kidneys can filter out. So every person is very different when they're trying to eat to support their kidneys. I just did this screenshot from YouTube. Sometimes I like to go scan YouTube, and I have my own YouTube channel where we do food videos on there. And I just thought this one was so interesting because they have everything from like the detoxes for your kidneys to like reverse your kidney failure in 30 days to what is the renal diet. And there can just be so much enticing information that is incorrect or confusing. And like I said, we're all different. So every restriction does not apply to everyone. Even people on dialysis, people that get peritoneal dialysis have very different diets from people that are on hemodialysis in order to stay healthy. So we're all very different, and that's why the confusion. I'm going to try to simply sort out a few of the pieces so you can kind of see the thought process. That, as always, I really, really strongly recommend and encourage people to work with a professional to sort things out. Not because you may not need help with meal planning or anything like that, but it really helps people establish priorities and see what's important for them individually. We're all different, and we all even need to eat different foods. So, things to think about when you're considering dietary change for your kidney disease. There's two big priorities that I feel matter here. The first one is, you want to slow progression. So if you're early stage kidney disease, there's some things that you think about that helps keep your kidneys stronger longer. And we'll talk in more detail about these, but protein, sodium, phosphorus, fiber, all of those really play into keeping your kidneys strong. Even for people that are on dialysis, maintaining that kidney function as much as possible really plays into this. And then the other big thing is preventing complications. So no one likes going into the hospital, and for people that are very later stage kidney disease, controlling things like potassium is important so they don't end up in the hospital with too much potassium in their blood. And for almost anyone, as early as stage 2, 3, starting to cut back on phosphorus, especially the chemical phosphates in the food that we'll talk about, makes a huge, huge difference on preventing complications. And those are complications like heart disease and bone disease that really play into it. As a side note here, talking about why it's different for everyone, someone that has early stage kidney failure, like stage 3, they don't need to watch their potassium intake unless they're on a certain medication that's making it hard for them to process it. Most people don't, and it can even be damaging to watch that because potassium is very, very helpful for the heart and for blood pressure. And so having someone be able to sort that out for you is important. So, sorting out the renal diet. Establish priorities. This is how we think and how we start helping people sort through the information and what's important for them. So if you're stage 3, probably the most important priority is slowing progression because you have some kidney function and the complications don't happen as easily. It's still important, but our first priority is slow progression and building the food that way. If you're stage 4 kidney disease, preventing complications is more the priority to start out, and it's, just staying out of the hospital from having high potassium levels is not too difficult once you know what to do. And then we focus on slowing progression. And stage 5, you're not on dialysis. Again, we're really focused on preventing complications, slowing progression, and when people are on dialysis, our big thing is we really want to prevent complications and keep people feeling good and healthy as long as possible. And right here, I'll say the number one tip for most people is work off of one grocery list, wherever you get that. I have one on my website, but different drug companies have grocery lists. Your dietitian has a grocery list. Davita.com has grocery lists. All the different websites that support kidney care have grocery lists. Don't try and pick 3 or 4 or 5 grocery lists and piece them together. Just pick one and stick with it. That helps sort out more confusion than almost anything else. So, slowing progression. Here is why these things matter, and then we'll talk about the specific way you apply them. So protein, it can be hard for your kidneys to filter, and so taking down that load on it, you still need protein, but taking a little bit less protein can help give the kidneys a little bit of a break. Phosphorus, same thing. It's just very hard to filter out for the kidneys. Sodium increases the pressure in your body and increases this pressure to filter, and so that can cause damage to the kidneys, and also causes, and then that in turn causes you to kind of release protein into your urine. Diabetes, that causes nerve damage, and then gut health, which is a big, big piece I've been focusing on in the last year, really focusing on how to keep your guts and your intestines and all that bacteria in your stomach really healthy is very, very significant in reducing inflammation. So talking about sodium, the big thing we see here is always salt. Think about salt and salt shaker. Most of my patients come in and say, we never use a salt shaker. We don't even have it anymore. We don't know where it is. But the other big piece is really sodium. For Americans, there was some research done, and they said that about 25% of our salt intake or more comes from restaurants. That's a big source of sodium. 65% comes from food that can be bought at like a retail store. And the 40% of our sodium, and these are different, they were looking at different things, so it's not going to add up to 100% here. More than 40% of our sodium intake, if we're looking at like in the household area, comes from just 10 different types of foods. Breads and rolls are a huge piece because we tend to be a big bread-eating country in America. Cold cuts, cured meats, or deli hams, those have a lot of sodium. That's one of the other big 10. Turkey, pizza, fresh and processed poultry, so that pre-frozen chicken that we get, a lot of times it's in a salt solution. It can have a lot of salt in it. We think we're eating something fresh and healthy, but it has a lot of salt. Soups, sandwiches, like cheeseburgers, cheese, pasta dishes, and things like meatloaf or spaghetti can have a lot of salt. Chips, pretzels, popcorn. So really, the research I've looked at in the past all say that really the salt shaker is only 10% of the sodium in our diet. It's everything else that is making the big, big difference here. So honing in on where you're getting that salt can make all the difference. So if it's restaurants, if you eat out a lot, fast food, or if you just need to eat out because you're busy with work or whatever, really starting to be mindful of what you eat at the restaurants can be helpful. All of the restaurants, unless they're like a very tiny local one, all the big chain restaurants, they have the nutrition facts on their website. And there's lots of apps you can download where you can look up the salt content. And sometimes all it takes is scanning through there, finding the lowest sodium one, or realizing your favorite dish, maybe you need to half it and put a big side, like a good fresh side of steamed vegetables or a salad. Even the fast food restaurants have salads now. And if you stay light on the dressing, they can be a low sodium choice. And then packaged foods that you eat, trying to look at different products can make a big, big difference in how much salt. So instead of getting the salted pretzels, get the unsalted ones. Instead of the salted corn chips, get the unsalted ones. Just looking closely at those can make a big difference, or even making your own or subbing it out with fresh foods can be really, really helpful. So this one is the biggest one. It doesn't matter what stage of kidney failure you're at, on dialysis, sodium is so, so, so important to look at. So protein. Protein is a super hot topic with kidney disease. There's a wide variety of opinions. The research can be conflicting. The general consensus by the national guidelines right now is less meat, to have a normalizer amount of protein if you're early stage kidney failure. If you're on dialysis, you have a high protein diet and you don't worry about your protein intake other than trying to fit in more. But with early stage kidney disease, we really want to start normalizing that. And what that means in actual food is you're looking at like 2 to 3 portions a day, and those portions are about the size of a deck of cards. So that's like 2 eggs or a piece of chicken or salmon about the size of the deck of cards. About 2 or 3 of those a day. In America, our average intake of meat is almost double what it needs to be for kidney disease. Just the regular person. We eat a lot of high protein foods. So cutting that back can be helpful. One of the easiest ways to do this, and I have this tip sheet on my website, is we call it doing meals with less meat. So it just using meat, but using it as a part of the meal and not the main feature. So a really common one is stir fry. Stir fry is a lot of vegetable. You can cut up 1 or 2 chicken breasts in there and stir fry it up, and you have less meat with a lot of vegetables. Kebab, salads, even thinking like tacos and burritos. You have a tortilla, you put your little bit of meat in it, fill it up with vegetables, maybe a little bit of rice in there too, and you have a great less meat meal where you've cut it back, but you don't feel like you're necessarily having less. Some pasta dishes can be great, homemade soups, even sandwiches can be a good option. In the picture I have, there's actually a vegetarian press sandwich. It's delicious, and it's one thing we featured on our web. You can make it ahead of time, and you can slice it up through the week. Really good for picnics. Yes, pot pies, if you're making your own, can be a good choice. Pizza, and we do some pizza recipes on our website where we use feta instead of regular cheese, and we use a garlic olive oil sauce instead of like heavy tomato sauce. A pizza can be a really great less meat meal, and some people are fine with tomato sauce and a little bit of cheese. So those are just some examples of how we can cut back protein. I strongly recommend a lot of my patients start moving towards, especially if they're early stage kidney failure like stage 3, that we start moving towards having vegetarian meals more often. Those can be higher in potassium. So if you're wanting to go towards more of a vegetarian, plant-based diet, which is wonderful, even for people on dialysis, they can do really great with that. It's really important to talk with a dietitian and make sure that you're getting the right nutrients, because it's easy to go astray and either get too much potassium or not enough protein or different things with a plant-based diet. So once you learn a few tips, it's not so hard, but protein is a super important piece to look at when you want to slow your progression of kidney disease. The other big thing is the gut, and I love this picture. This picture is from Johns Hopkins, and they talk about the garden of your gut, and your gut is just this diverse area that is so important in modulating inflammation and clearing toxins and everything. That's why probiotics, I always see all these commercials, and a lot of people talking about probiotics. They're such a hot topic right now. So the reason for that is that in your gut wall, and your gut has these different layers to it, but your gut wall houses about 70% of the cells that make up the immune system. So it makes sense that if for some reason we have damaged that gut wall, or if the bacteria that's in our gut that's supposed to break down the food and protect that gut wall, if they are damaged from heavy antibiotic use, or there's a lot of different things that can cause problems to that gut wall. When those get damaged, it impacts our immune system, and that can create an array of different chronic diseases. So part of my practice is I really love to talk about the gut and what we can do to nourish the gut. Some of that is using good probiotics. Not all probiotics are created equal, but using a good probiotic, which is basically a good bacteria that we put in our gut. I really encourage fruit and vegetable intake. For people at an early stage 3, they don't have to worry about potassium, and so we just bulk that up as much as possible. The reason why those fruits and vegetables matter is because that fiber and a lot of the nutrients in those are what that bacteria feed off of. So if you don't feed your bacteria, if you're putting a lot of saturated fats, or if you're putting a lot of really heavy protein foods down through your gut, they don't have enough fiber to feed off of, and it causes them to not be as strong or as diverse. There's a couple foods we call prebiotic foods, and they specifically really the bacteria in our gut really like them. I listed just a few here that are kidney friendly: garlics, onions, leeks, apples, barley, oats, jicama. Jicama is one of my personal favorites, but those foods included in your diet can really help nourish a healthy gut on top of a few other lifestyle things that you can do. But the gut is very important in slowing progression of kidney disease. There's a few products out there, even probiotics, that are specifically targeted towards kidney disease and the gut, and it has to do with how they remove toxins. But it's a really newer area of research that's absolutely fascinating. So now we've talked a little bit about how we can slow progression of the kidney disease: protein, sodium, and the gut, which really comes down to fiber, getting enough produce, just understanding a little bit about how your gut works there. The next piece is understanding how to prevent complication. And this comes down to potassium. And again, this is why the renal diet gets confusing. For people early stage kidney failure, they don't have to worry about potassium unless there's a lab that's shown up. There's some blood pressure medications that make it hard to filter potassium. But most people early stage kidney disease don't have to worry about high and low potassium foods, and they shouldn't be restricting them. But if you're later stage, just understanding your high and low potassium foods is a big, big step in just preventing a high potassium episode. I have two handouts I have on my website. I have a high potassium foods, and generally people print this out. I print it out for them, put it on the fridge, and they can have about one serving a day. So if bananas are their favorite thing, they can have a small banana or a half a banana, and that would be just fine. If it's avocados they love, they can have a quarter of an avocado a day, and they really enjoy that. Or sweet potatoes. So they have a little bit they can do, but we just want to kind of pull back a little bit on the overall potassium. And then the big thing, because my big thing is focusing on what you can have, is looking for all the low potassium foods you can have and the ones that you love. So a lot of people look at this like, oh, there's a lot of foods I like there. I love this time of year, all the berries are coming in season. So strawberries and blueberries and raspberries and blackberries are coming on sale. There's apples and applesauce that you can do, and grapes and pineapple and pears. So there's a lot of fruits that you can do. Vegetables, we have asparagus and alfalfa and cucumbers and green beans, radishes, turnips. These are all foods that you can have. And when people find the foods they like and they're familiar with, and they focus on those, it makes them not feel deprived. And if they need to have a high potassium food now and then, it's okay. But that's the big thing on understanding your produce. Produce comes down to potassium. So if there's confusion about produce, you have to understand what stage you're at and how much of a restriction that you need. Okay, so the other thing, and this is actually a prevent complication and a slow progression, but I wanted to put it down here, and that is phosphorus. So no matter what stage you're at, and this comes in at the very first visit when people come in, we start talking about how to find phosphates on your labels. Phosphorus is used in food manufacturing all the time. Sometimes it's used in powdered drinks so they don't clump together. Sometimes it's used as a preservative. It's used as a flavor enhancer. It has enormous amounts of use. The classic high phosphorus food that has these chemical phosphates in it is Coke and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper. So we hear that all the time. Don't drink the dark colas. And they mean, you know, Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper. What you want to do is look at your labels, and you're going to want to look under the ingredients. And I was seeing if I had a little highlighter here. I don't think I do, but you want to look under ingredients. It's not going to show up under nutrition facts. it won't be where you see sodium or potassium or protein. You won't see it there 90% of the time. You have to look under ingredients, and you're going to look for the signature word PHOS, phos. This happens to be a tuna can label. Tuna is a good example because a lot of us consider tuna fish a healthy food, and there's lots of tuna without phosphate. And this one, they has pyrophosphate, and you can see right there that phos is in there, and that's how I know that this has a chemical phosphorus added to it. No matter what stage of kidney disease you're at, if you just can get used to starting to switch your products so they don't have these chemical phosphates in them, it's a really, really big deal. These phosphates are not only difficult for our kidneys to process out, but our body, these chemical phosphates, we call them inorganic phosphates, they absorb them almost 100%. They're not bound up with fiber like in beans and some other natural foods, and our body just absorbs them completely. So looking out for these can not only help slow progression, but it prevents complications. Phosphorus is a sneaky mineral, and it can cause your bones to break down. It can cause heart disease. It really makes a big, big difference. So I just pulled this up. This is actually off of Sanofi's website, and they just talk about exchanges when it comes to phosphorus. So instead of macaroni and cheese, you can do pesto pasta. Instead of pizza, you could do like a French bread with like kind of a homemade French bread pizza that's really easy. Instead of a Coke or Pepsi, we can do Mountain Dew or another light soda, and that can also be helpful. Actually, root beer is usually okay for most people as well. The other thing that I think is so important, and this is before we go into how you think about making your diet livable, is think can do instead of don't have. And I love this guy. I read this comic all growing up, but poor Hagar. He goes to his little witch doctor, and the doctor says, stop overeating, stop drinking, stop staying out late, stop fighting, stop worrying, stop eating sweets, stop gambling, you know, like stop, don't do this, don't do that. And he goes home and says, what did the doctor say? I don't know, I stopped listening. And a lot of times we can feel that we just hear, don't have this, don't have that, instead of what you can actually have, and there's so much. And again, going back to it, that's why having that one grocery list is super powerful, because you can see all the things you can have, and that's really, really helpful for everyone that I've worked with. So a couple ways to really love your food. A big thing is use acid, and what I mean by that is use vinegars, use lemons, use limes. There's a book that I read recently, and it's called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And this lady, she cooks and teaches cooking based on these 4 elements, and acid is one of the 4 elements of making your food really, really delicious. So to give you a couple, and we use it a lot on our website when we're trying out new recipes to kind of sub out for salt, because the acidic sour flavor is really important. So for example, lemon or lime juice, it adds a really clean, fresh flavor to any sort of citrusy thing. It's good with fruits, it's good with fish, it's good with raw or cooked vegetables. You see it in creamy dressings a lot. That tang that you get in mayonnaise, for example, usually comes from a vinegar or a lemon. Vinegar, on the other hand, it has such a broad range of what you can use depending on what kind, and there's so many different kinds out there. There's that sweet sour taste of balsamic, there's a fruity taste in white wine vinegar, and then there's kind of that oaky aged notes you can get in a red wine vinegar, a really tart tang from just distilled white vinegar or apple cider vinegar. So if you have a really savory food, then you might try adding a little bit of red wine vinegar, like to a stew. Or if you have like some pickled onions or cucumbers, add just a touch of lemon juice to them, or to a bean salad, and those can always be good. Even like sweets, you can put a little bit of lemon juice into like a fruit puree, or if you're using some Cool Whip, adding a tiny bit of sour cream to that Cool Whip can give it kind of a tang if you're using it to top maybe a white cake or some strawberries, if you're doing like a strawberry shortcake. So that's a really important thing. Using spices. I love using Penzi spices. They're really good, high quality, but just picking a spice in the store can be really, really awesome. And you try and experiment with it a few things. Look up some recipes based on cumin, or look up some recipes based on cloves, or whatever spice you want to try. There's great spice blends in the store. You just look out that they're herbs only and not salt. And using those spices and starting to get familiar with them can really take your food from blah to hurrah. Like, it can really make your food taste awesome. Even applesauce, adding a little bit of cloves and allspice and cinnamon now makes your applesauce this really flavorful fall food rather than just plain, simple, boring applesauce. Trying new things is important. So if you've never had jicama, I know I talked about that earlier, try jicama. If you've never tried spaghetti squash, try that. The internet, I mean, you can look on YouTube and people will show you how to cook it. You can ask your dietitian. They should know how to cook some of these other new foods. Just trying new foods can really help people not feel restricted. And then I really love using the internet. Almost all of the websites that are there to support patients, they have recipes on them. And some are good and some are not good. I like using Sodium Girl a lot. She had stage 4 kidney failure, I think, from lupus, and she was able to reverse it a little bit by really watching her diet. And I think she does some plant-based recipes as well, but she has some beautiful pictures, great recipes. We slowly are adding recipes to our website. We're a little bit slow this last month because the website changed, and it's been a little bit crazy hectic at my house, but over the summer it'll get going again. We're excited. We're posting a dumpling recipe. I had an Asian student that was working with me, and we worked through making dumplings, which are so easy, and they're so, so good, and I'm excited to post that later this week. Cooking for Your Kidneys is a really neat website, too. It's run by a former dialysis patient. He got a transplant about a year ago, and he's a chef, and he's ran several very successful businesses up in New York, successful restaurants, and he felt like the renal diet should not be so boring because he loves food. And so he has these videos, and go to his website and watch them, about how to cook and different ways you can make your food really good on the renal diet. And those are a couple ways you can use your food. And one thing I forgot to add here as well is sometimes using a very strong flavored ingredient that might be limited, but use a small amount can be helpful. So, for example, using a tiny bit of bacon in your eggs. If you've cooked up a good high-quality bacon, chopped it up, it's in small bits, you can use a little bit of bacon. Or using a really strong flavored cheese and shredding it finely and then sprinkling it on your food. That can add a lot of flavor, but it won't add a lot of the phosphorus or salt. You're using just a small amount for the flavor, and that's another great way to really love your food. And we try and do that in some of our recipes online as well. Or we mentioned the variations of, you could add a little bit of cheese to this to spice it up. I think we have like a carrot ginger pureed soup, and we talk about different toppings you can add on to it to really make the flavor pop. So the other thing that can make your diet so much more livable, not to mention lovable, is get to know some options in your store. When I go grocery shopping, I might pick an area, whether it's bread or crackers or something I'm using frequently, and I'll look at 3 or 4 different products. And what I'm looking at is not the claims on the label, because they're going to only market, they market very carefully. I just want to look at the labels, and I'm going to show you the things you're going to want to look at on your labels. Look at your labels. If you can read labels, you have an enormous amount of power over your diet. Because the information's there, and you can control so much more, and you can understand. I really feel like reading labels is liberating. Even being able to look up products online, and sometimes I'll do that. I'll get on the online grocery stores, or I'll get on some of the online health food stores, and I'll just look up some of the products that are out there, and you can ask your stores to stock them. Excuse me. or order them online. If there's a product you love and you use every day, look for an alternative. So if rice-a-roni is your thing you use every day, sometimes you have to read a few labels until you find one that has less salt. You look in the freezer section and see what the flavored steamed rices have there. Or you start looking at an easy way you can make it at home. And then rice-a-roni is not out of your diet. You've just found a way to substitute it. So I wanted to give you a couple examples of some specifics and why it matters. So this is just a chicken broth. I did 4 different kinds. These are all ones that I found at Walmart. And you can see the sodium is almost the same on all of them. 140 for the Great Value one, 140 for the unsalted Kitchen Basics, 140 for the Campbell's low sodium chicken broth. The Swanson 33% less sodium chicken broth actually had 570. And you can see how misleading that label is, that you're like, oh, this is a less sodium product, so it must be better for me. But it has almost 3-4 times the amount of sodium as the other ones. Then looking at potassium, same thing. So you can look at that organic Great Value, this is the Walmart brand of chicken broth. It has 15 milligrams of potassium. The Kitchen Basics has 370. I have no idea how much was in the Swanson one that wasn't available. Yeah, and I just saw a question pop up. This is amount per serving, and the serving sizes would be fairly similar. So this isn't for the whole thing. This would be per serving on the back. And then the Campbell's, again, 230 milligrams of potassium per serving. So that varies quite a bit. So looking at your labels and honing in on the products can give you a lot of power. Because obviously, in this case, the Walmart brand of chicken broth would be a good choice if we're going to use it to make a gravy or a sauce or a soup, whereas some of these other ones wouldn't. The other thing is that we'll talk a little bit more about labels in a second, but that's just an example of how reading your label gives you a lot of power in knowing which products to buy to be successful. So going back to labels, these are the big pieces that you look at when you're looking at labels. And these are chocolate cereals, and you can see from the front, they have these great health claims. It has whole grain guarantee, and they got that neat check mark with a little wheat sprout. They have may reduce the risk of heart disease. It's made with real cocoa, as opposed to, I'm not sure what the substitute is, but not real cocoa. So you want to look at your serving size first. I was looking at soy sauce a couple weeks ago, and it was interesting because at first I scanned all the labels and I just looked at sodium content, and I was like, oh wow, this one's so low. And I looked at the serving size, and the serving size was a teaspoon, whereas all the others, the serving size was a tablespoon. And so that means this one that looked really low at a teaspoon, actually I needed to times it by 3, and then it was more than all the others. So looking at what their serving size is really, really important. And I did see a question just popped up about whole grain, and we're going to touch on that in just a minute. So then you're looking at the sodium content. This is where I really pull people down into it. In a day, to give you a perspective, usually you're aiming for 1,500, maybe 2,300 milligrams a day. So I tell most of my patients to make it simple to aim for around 500 to 600 milligrams of sodium per meal. And that makes it easy to break down in their head when they're thinking about products. And if it's low sodium. And I mean, breakfast cereal can vary an enormous amount. I think some brands of cereals can have as much as 300 milligrams for that 3/4, half a cup cereal, all the way down to 0. Shredded wheat has 0 milligrams of sodium per serving. It's just wheat. Then if potassium's on the label, then we'll look at that as well. So a low potassium, and your potassium restriction just depends. I mostly use potassium to compare products. It's supposed to be on the label for all products in the next year or two. They kind of keep moving back that deadline, but that's coming up soon, which will be helpful for a lot of patients to see the potassium content. If you're early stage kidney failure, again, the potassium content doesn't matter quite as much for you. And then we look at the ingredients. That's the other big piece that I'm always looking at. And I'm specifically looking for that phosphate additive. And in this one, you can see in these Cheerios, which actually all Cheerios have trisodium phosphate added to them, they have phosphate added to it, that chemical phosphorus. So if we can find a different brand, that's really helpful. I think in my store, I'm trying to think what brand I found without the phosphorus. It might have just been the store brand that didn't have that trisodium phosphorus. So those are kind of the big pieces. For different people, they may have a couple other things they're looking at. They might be looking at carbohydrates, the diabetes. That might be another piece to look at. But sorting that out with a dietitian, if you need to look at more than those, that's something that would be helpful to talk with the dietitian so you know specifically what's important for you. But for all patients, they should definitely be looking at the serving size, the sodium, and looking for those phosphate additives. Some of the other pieces of the label are specific to the person. And a lot of times all you're doing is picking a product and comparing it from one product to the other and which one is the lowest so you can choose the best product for you. So the other thing that can make your diet so easy and so much more level is starting to think about alternatives. So using these different spices again. So if you love pumpkin pie, we do a pumpkin pie where we use spaghetti squash and then we use pumpkin pie spice, and it tastes almost exactly the same. Most of the flavor in pumpkin pie comes from that pumpkin pie spice blend. We'll use extracts a lot. We do a coconut cake or we use coconut extracts, but rather than a lot of coconut milk, coconut flakes, whatever, we use coconut extract for the flavor, and then we did a little toasted coconut on the top. So kind of garnish it and add and make it look beautiful. Vinegars again, lemons, limes, using strong spices and herbs is really, really a wonderful thing to do. And I just saw a comment come across here. Jeanette was saying how she uses essential oils for flavoring, and that's a great idea too. There's a lot of good, strong flavors that you can put into your foods without using the real product. So if oranges are your favorite thing and you're on a potassium restriction, using a little orange extract or essential oils can be really helpful. So this is another example of how when you start thinking about other options, it can be make your diet so livable. So if oranges, again, are your favorite thing, sometimes finding a good citrus substitute, so pineapple or pineapple chunks or lemons, or even using a couple of those little cuties or mandarin oranges can kind of get you your orange fix. Using the orange zest, and when you're cooking, if you're going to make like an orange muffin or an orange bread, use the zest. Can be a really great way to get that flavor in. And then before I go through this recap, I just wanted to address this one other question. Jeanette had asked, is whole grain better for you than white bread? And whole grains, and I'm glad she brought that up, are another thing that gets really confusing on the kidney diet. The very old historic recommendation is that you should use only white products, white rice, white bread, white pasta. That recommendation no longer stands. The reason for it originally was that the whole grain products have a little bit more phosphorus in them, and potassium as well. However, in those fibrous whole grain products, a lot of the fiber is bound up, or a lot of the phosphorus is bound up in the fiber, and so you actually only absorb around 60% of the phosphorus content. All my patients, I have them eat the whole grain products, and it's partially because I want to nourish the gut. It's good food for those bacteria in your gut that need to be fed. On very rare occasions with someone who's very, very late stage kidney disease, not on dialysis, and we're looking at potassium, we might pull back on some of those. But again, it's very, very individualized, and I primarily am okay with my whole grain products. Even my dialysis patients, I'm okay with them using a whole grain product over a white product because it's so much better for them, not just the fiber, but also the nutrients that you get from those whole grains. So that's generally my recommendation, and I just did the data on my dialysis unit last month. We had no one with high potassiums. I rarely have any high potassiums using whole grains, and phosphorus is almost always an issue. I've almost never seen it be an issue with whole grains. It's always an issue with the cheese and things like that. A couple other questions that came across. Pumpernickel, rye, yeah, those are both products that I use, and I think they're great because they have a lot of good flavor as well when it comes to breads. Again, with your breads or those grain products, you're looking at the salt content if you're going to eat a lot of them, because that can be a really heavy amount of salt, and the salt content even in bread can vary a lot within different brands. So those are great questions, and I appreciate the questions that came across the chat. So as a recap here, probably the number one biggest tip to sort out the diet is stick with one list. Stick with one list. Don't try and work off of a bunch of different lists. Second thing is work with a professional so you can identify the most important priorities for you and for your stage of kidney disease and your personal health. It can be conflicting because it seems like all the priorities and different diets are asking you to do different things, and it's just about establishing the priorities, and you can see that they all fit together. And sometimes things don't have to be as restrictive as it seems. And remember that not everyone needs all of the classic kidney diet restrictions. Not everyone needs a potassium restriction. Not everyone needs a protein restriction. Not everyone needs to be on a high-protein diet. Everyone is very, very different. And I think the other big tip that I hope you're pulling from today is that love your kitchen. If you're not a cook, maybe experiment and find some basic things you can cook. Cooking at home saves time, money, and it's so much more nutritious. Be your own best advocate for that little typo there. And that means that you're looking at the labels, you're thinking of questions, you're asking questions. Almost on Facebook, there are patient support groups that are really, really helpful. And you can ask questions. I am actually on some of those patient support groups, and I'll chime in every once in a while if there's a real specific nutrition question. And then use your resources. Every patient support group out there has great resources, and they want to be helpful and support everybody with kidney disease. Those people that work in kidney disease, we are very passionate about making it work for you. I'm not unfamiliar with what a chronic disease can do to someone. My husband was quite sick in the last year, and I know what it's like to have multiple dietary restrictions and things that are difficult and trying to make that work within a family setting. So working with a professional and having a cheerleader and someone to really encourage you and help you navigate things can make your diet so much more easy. So a couple questions, and I'm going to pull from the chat again. I had a question. I've been told not to eat nuts since cashews are not really nuts, or they're okay for stage 3. So this again goes down to why are people telling us not to eat nuts? So nuts are a great food. They're full of some healthy fats. They have a good amount of fiber. If you're trying to eat less meat because you're early stage kidney failure, they're a great protein substitute as well. So nuts can be high in phosphorus, but they're the same thing as whole grains. The fiber binds up a lot of that phosphorus, so you don't absorb all of it. So I have a lot of my early stage kidney failure patients, they can eat nuts and it's fine. And I encourage them to do that. They might have a peanut butter sandwich instead of a chicken sandwich at lunchtime. And that's a good vegetarian option. So nuts are not on the no-no list for every patient. Some of my dialysis patients, we limit it because it's easy to eat a lot of nuts in one sitting, and that can bump their phosphorus up. But even then, it's not 100%. Some vegetarian dialysis patients are able to include them successfully. So I don't have nuts on my no list. And especially if you're early stage kidney failure, I don't eliminate them. Another question that came across, high fiber is good for you then? And my answer is yes. I do like to include fiber, especially from fruits and vegetables, because it feeds that microbiome. It makes you satiated. There's a lot of benefits to a good high fiber diet, whether or not you have kidney disease. So I really encourage people to get enough fiber. That's big, big, big in supporting your gut health. I'm going to open up the line, or if you have a question, you can *6 to unmute your line. If you have a voice question, you can also type it over chat, and I can answer questions now as well.
So on the phone, I think it should be #6 to unmute, just as a reminder. But it looks like you have a question in chat.
So I did have one other question come up on the chat, and if there's another voice question, let me know. This patient said, I'm new to CKD. I have to do a CT. Will the barium harm my kidneys? And I'll say you definitely need to talk to your doctor about that if you're early stage CKD. That's kind of outside my dietary realm, and a lot of it depends on balancing different priorities out. But I would definitely talk to your doctor about that. Some of the different diets and things are not great for the kidneys. So talk to your doctor if you're concerned about that, and they should be able to give you a good answer about that. Other questions that are out there?
Jessianna, I want to thank you very much for your informative presentation today. I'd also like to let everybody know that our next issue of the Kidney Citizen, which will be out shortly and will be available on our website, has an article on inflammation that Jessianna wrote for us. I also want to encourage everyone to attend our next patient webinar, which will be on May 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have a psychologist take us on the emotional ride of the transplant process. One last thing, please.
I was going to just say thank you for letting me be here today. If there's other questions, I can field a few over email. I'd appreciate you going to my website or follow me on social media to get some updates. It's been quiet the last month or two. Like I said, we've had some crazy stuff at my house, but it will be getting it will be getting busy over this summer, especially. So that we have a lot of fun things that we do, and we always make the kidney diet lively and friendly as possible.
Thank you again so much, and I do encourage everyone to visit the website. There's a lot of interesting material on there. And thank you again, everyone, for attending. Jessianna, thank you for presenting for us again. It was great, and we'll all talk soon.